Jay.
So M21, almost, is it all here? Pretty exciting.
It just got all revealed. So now we can finally see exactly how tight of a core set this is. Where do you want to start, dude?
How about Planeswalkers? We haven't mentioned hide nor hair of a Planeswalker, and they gave you 5.
Yeah, so I think, and this is just a theory.
Yeah.
But my theory is that they pumped the brakes a little bit, and that this set is the first set in the we need to chill out on Planeswalkers era.
Yeah.
Not just like it's like I think they pushed some stuff, and it's not like these are all unplayable or whatever, but I think that there was a concerted effort to kind of pull back a little bit on Planeswalkers. And, I think that temporarily, I think right now the power level of Standard is in a really bizarre place because there's like a ton of power in some stuff that makes a bunch of other power mean nothing. Like it, you know what I mean? Like it's like there's certain things that just really invalidate most of the sweet cards.
Yeah. I think I know what you mean.
But this could be the beginning of a new trend because there's going to be a rotation eventually, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking, like, these cards were these cards theoretically meant to be played alongside Oko as Planeswalkers? In theory?
It's clear that, like, Oko, like, whatever the world is where you just play with Oko, Uro, Once Upon a Time, Summervale, Asian Atreach, like, Yorion costs 3 less, like, or whatever. Like, that world doesn't make any sense. It's clear that there were some basic assumptions different. So regardless of whatever that alternate universe is, dude, this universe, these are a little bit different of a mix of Planeswalkers. And, there's some interesting stuff going on here. And I look forward to, first of all, some of these will probably see a little bit of play. Hopefully.
Oh, I think possibly
Are you in a Chandra?
4. Possibly 4 we'll see play.
If you want to start at the bottom, then
all right, let's start.
How about Garrick?
No, Basri Ket.
Okay, talk to me about Basri Ket.
Basri Ket. Pros: it costs 3. Cons: the rest of the card. Right. So
what?
I'm not a huge fan of Basri Ket. You think this is going to be one of the better ones?
No. Well, it depends on what you mean by better.
Okay. So we're on the same page. These are not War of the Spark or better Planeswalkers by and large, right?
No. Well, not just by and large, but by.
By. So Basri Ket, 3 casting cost, Planeswalker, 3 loyalty. Basri is a new character, I believe. The white Planeswalker. We just run through the abilities and stuff and talk about the rate.
Okay, so every turn, so it's a 1 white, 3 loyalty. It's +1 ability. It's put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. That's not bad. It's not that good, but it's not that bad. Second of all, -2. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures attack this turn, create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. That ability is good. That's where he gets his money.
Yeah, so, that is a powerful ability if left to,
No, you don't have to. There's no left. It's immediate. But I'll get to that in a second. So the -6 is you get an emblem with at the beginning of combat in your turn, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So that's a pretty good ultimate, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's also because it's an emblem, right? So if you actually get to that point, it's very, very difficult to interact with. They're eventually going to get you.
And part of the reason I think they had to make that so enticing is because his -2 ability, his -2 ability gets paid. So it's clear to me that you got to be underestimating his -2. How many tokens do you need from this -2 to have gotten your money?
2.
So you're saying that 2 1/1 haste creatures and a planeswalker that can put loyalty counters, not loyalty, but +1/+1 counters on stuff every turn while also making it indestructible. Like, that's pretty good, right?
I want to answer the question in not like a yes/no fashion. Can I imagine contexts where I would want to do that? Yes. In the marketplace of things that I can do in this category of cards, would I choose this combination for this casting cost, given other available tools? No.
Well, hold on now. I'm just talking about from a rate perspective for a minute. You're on board with Spectral Procession, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, no, you say of course. They're similar. Okay, so would you agree that a 1/1 haste is at least in the ballpark with a 1/1 flyer for as far as a bunch of tokens go?
A 1/1 haste versus a 1/1 in terms of token creatures specifically.
Like you're getting a bunch and you're playing a token deck or whatever. You're playing
I
like
think a 1/1 flyer is demonstrably better than a 1/1 haste when it comes to tokens.
Well, okay. They're at least in the same league. No? Okay, maybe it's if you want to say it's slightly worse, I'll give you that. Fine.
You know what? I'm thinking like, what do you...
Because I don't think it is slightly worse necessarily, because I think that sometimes attacking a planeswalker and being able to do a little bit of extra damage is actually worth something. But I don't know. It might be slightly worse. Certainly a 1/1 haste in the abstract is a slightly worse game piece than a 1/1 flyer because of how quickly a 1/1 haste gets outclassed. My only thought was if you have enough token making where they can't block everything anyway, and you have enough anthems, not just token making, but you know what I mean, dorks, like random dudes. So with Basri Ket, you end up with a 1 loyalty planeswalker who every turn is able to put a +1/+1 counter on something.
Yeah, and then it
let's
probably
not even
gets
count the
in,
indestructible
right?
part yet.
It messes people up.
That's got to be worth more than a 1/1 flyer.
That +1 ability?
Just having Basri Ket in play with 1 loyalty, and you've already used him for the turn, that's better than a 1/1 flyer
than a single
general.
1/1 flyer.
Right.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah.
Right. So in the case where the problem with Basri Ket is that you don't always have 2 creatures attacking.
Yeah. That's really the thing. If you were just going to get to 1/1 hasters for the -2, I would have a completely different
that's
thought
what I
process around this card, right? So the problem
that's part of why I was agreeing with you that the -2, if you attack with 2, you're ahead of the game. I think you're getting a little bit better than Spectral Procession for a little bit easier.
Yeah.
The problem is that the ceiling pays you when you don't need it as much, and the floor punishes you when you wanted it.
Yeah, so like Basri, if you're like in a good position, like you haven't broken the game open yet, Basri can easily break a game open that you were more or less at parity, right? So it's got that to it, depending on how the game is being zeroed out, right? But I mean, not that every card has to do everything, but like this card isn't very good in a lot of potential scenarios you can be in, slightly behind, need to defend yourself, stuff like that. So it's not that every card has to be everything. It's just there's a lot of cards that are about this casting cost or this kind of class of card that can do more than I'm imagining. But like you said, a lot of those are going to rotate.
Yeah. Plus, I don't know that it's that good of a time for 1-drops in white.
Really?
So I don't. Well,
I mean,
maybe
one of the best decks, I think, before all these rule changes, because I don't know. I don't know what the best.
No. But the rules changes happened. There are no white aggro decks anymore, right?
But I guess we just play Growth Spiral now. Okay, so okay, you're probably right. That was so 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So if you're not into Basri Ket, if you got him as the floor, talk to me about Garruk. What do you like about Garruk?
So Garruk is let's just run through it for a second. So Garruk Unleashed breaks the frame. I guess they all break the frame. So 4 casting cost planeswalker with 4 loyalty. His abilities are +1 up to 1 target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. -2 create a 3/3 beast creature token. Then if an opponent controls more creatures than you, put a loyalty counter on Garruk Unleashed, and then -7. You get an emblem with at the beginning of your end step. You may search your library for a creature card and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. I really like the -2. So Garruk is a high expectation for 2/3/3s, and maybe more. Like you might get 2/3/3s and keep Garruk because of that additional loyalty ability. That's really where I see the value on Garruk.
I mean, the problem though is that how much are you even like? I guess.
So
I don't know.
Nissa,
it's just
right?
How much are you doing? Like, is that even like high impact these days?
Okay, so I'm just walk a sec back at comparable planeswalkers. I mean, I use comparable in quotes. Nissa is a different animal than Garruk, right? Now, Nissa's for a long time was one of the probably top 5, top 10, certainly most defining cards in the format. But for one more mana, Nissa was giving you essentially like a 3/3 a turn. Call it right. I mean, a lot of other things too. Like you untap with Nissa, you get this enormous mana engine. But again, Nissa asked more of you, right? The 3/3s weren't extra; they were kind of a reappropriation of stuff you already had, and you needed forests and stuff like that. But the prospect of generating multiple 3/3s is, I think, potentially very, very high impact. I think like any card that isn't just like a unilateral combo kill is going to require some amount of context for it, but I think that we've seen a lot of contexts where cast this thing on turn 3, pump out a couple of 3/3s, or even get that +1 for the kind of giant growth punch in there, and I think that you're in a good position. I'm imagining, right? And on a rate basis, I think this card is better than the original Garruk. Am I crazy on that one?
Why would this be better than the original Garruk? Like, the -2 is like worse, right? Because like that clearly you'd rather like he does start one loyalty higher, but like what percentage of the time is your opponent going to even have more creatures, right? So like he doesn't make tokens as effectively as Garruk unless you're like losing by a lot. And then the +1 ability is +3/+3 in trample. You like that better than +2 mana immediately?
Yeah, I guess.
Of any color and untap your land? I mean,
I guess the original Garruk did some damage.
Plus, the original Garruk could ultimate in one turn, right? Like that's not close, right?
Okay. You've convinced me. I guess he's much worse than the original Garruk. I don't know.
I thought so. He was bringing up the floor for me.
See,
but I don't know.
I think that this Garruk is going to see play. I mean, I don't know.
I think it will. I think that Elspeth's. I mean, the first ability's got an Elspeth thing going on. That's why the Garruk is good.
Well, the second ability's also got the other Elspeth thing. It's just going the wrong direction.
That's a really big difference. They wouldn't have had to ban Oko if it was going the other direction with a -2.
If it would have, it was just a 0.
Oh my god.
But I mean, what do you think about that -7? That's a pretty powerful ability, right? If you get there.
Yeah, but whatever. I mean, yeah, I guess if you get there, like whatever that board state looks like. But sure, that would be a fun time.
All right, so you've got Garruk at the bottom. I had Basri.
Nah. Basri might be at the bottom too. I don't know.
I did want to.
It's hard because the format is so different. It's like it's not like this is what these cards are about. Like now, current day. What do you want to squeeze in?
Oh, about Basri. I was just thinking, like, I can imagine Basri being like a sideboard card for Azorius mirror matches. If you could just sneak it in, it hits the battlefield, and then you just plus on creatures that you don't have. And then you just get to the -6 and you just win the mirror match with that. Like that's like a very difficult situation for some decks to interact with. So, and I think like you might be in a spot like that. It's a good casting cost for trying to win those kind of fights, I think. So,
all right, here's a spot for you for Basri. So right now he's worse at giving indestructible he's better at giving indestructible, but he's a worse card than Gideon. Right?
Yeah, he's just that's really where I was setting the bar. He's just way worse than Gideon to me.
But he does do some stuff with the whole +1/+1 counter thing. Now, let's imagine that it's post-rotation. All right? So you're playing... so first of all, Gideon's gone. Second of all, your deck is built around stuff like Terror of the Peaks and Sporeweb Weaver. Sporeweb Weaver and Terror of the Peaks are two more cards from core set M21 that together form an infinite combo.
Man, Terror of the Peaks is a great card with or without Sporeweb Weaver.
Well, and Sporeweb Weaver is an underrated card to begin with. But like, okay, so let's walk through this for a second. Let's start with Terror of the Peaks, even though he's like at the end, just because he's like the best card. Well, 3 red, 5/4 flyer, spells your opponent's cast. The target Terror of the Peaks costs an additional 3 life, kind of a sideways Thunderbird Regent. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target.
Card's awesome.
Card is awesome. There are so many people who are hating on this card because it's good in a way that isn't the way the cards that are currently good are good. But this card's rate is so phenomenal. It's going to demand homes to be made for it. It's too good not to be played.
I mean, it's just awesome. Like, you just tap out for it.
It is.
And if they kill it, like, it got them a little bit, right?
Lava Spiked them. That's like a card.
And if you don't kill it, you get them, right? Like, you have a 5/4 flyer for 5, which is fine. Like, that's utterly fine. And God knows how much damage you're going to do next turn.
If you do any damage, you're so ahead. Like, picture you play a 3/3 or a 4/4.
It's
okay, so compared to like Enter the God Eternals, if you have Terror of the Peaks and you manage to get off a single shot, Terror of the Peaks can actually go upstairs, unlike Enter the God Eternals. And then instead of the 4 life that you would gain, you're not dealing 3, Terror of the Peaks would do 3 to them. But you have a 5/4 flying Pandemonium instead of a 4/4 token. I mean, like, I don't know, dude. I think Terror of the Peaks is awesome. If you have Sporeweb Weaver in play, and Terror of the Peaks, by the way, I think you can use it as a sideboard card for when you want to go bigger. I think you can use it in your main deck in some kind of like a Gruul or Rakdos Monsters deck. I think it could be a part of I think you could actually use it as part of some sort of Izzet deck. It's probably at its best in some sort of a red-green monsters deck, with the possible exception of a combo deck, such as with Sporeweb Weaver, which is Sporeweb Weaver.
So wait,
is 2 green.
Let me interrupt you, Patrick. So I totally want to hear the combo thing, but I just want to rattle off some Terror of the Peaks thoughts before we get there.
Love it.
Your thing is going to be too exciting, right? And then regular Terror of the Peaks is going to get drowned out. So here's the thing. What I think, Terror of the Peaks, I think you're right in just main deck. It's a great Gruul card. Gruul decks play 5 Casting Gust Dragons all the time, right? This one's just better than a lot of the other options if you get to untap with it. Separately, I think it has so many potential homes. I just imagine these situations where like 2 guys are just punching each other in the face. Like punch, 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 and then somebody stops punching, right? Like Terror of the Peaks is like the last punch. You put it down and you're like, here's my Terror of the Peaks. Kill it if you can. If they rip and they can kill it, then you got them. It's just another punch in the face. If they can't kill it, it's a 5/4 flyer. It's an awesome, like, end of we're just trying to get each other with Morzi's getting each other with attrition situation. It's the classic kind of Tsuyoshi Fujita card that doesn't seem like it makes sense that you would put into a 20-land deck out of the sideboard. Like, it just doesn't make any sense that it would be in this deck, but it's awesome for the situations that you put it in for. And I think you're right. It just is such an elegant, probably addition to decks like Izzet or kind of a bigger red. I'm very excited to play it in fair decks, but it sounds like you have a good home for an unfair deck.
One thing I do want to note, by the way, as a weakness with it, as a used fair, it's got a real weakness to Planeswalkers. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people are hating on it, is because if a Planeswalker comes down and can neutralize Terror of the Peaks with its ability, you didn't do the 3.
You didn't get much bonus, yeah.
Plus, they just have a Planeswalker, So, like, you do got to be careful. it doesn't match up that well against a lot of planeswalkers, but that's not necessarily a deal breaker. So the combo though. So Spore Web Weaver is 2 and a green for a 1/4 reach hexproof from blue. When Spore Web Weaver is dealt damage, you gain 1 life and create a 1/1 green Saproid. So what are your thoughts on this card, Fair?
It seems like just for Fair, it seems like a super annoying card to play in certain matchups. It's like unbeatable for some decks, honestly. Like,
what? Really?
Yeah.
What?
Like Fair blue creature decks. Like it resolves. Like they can't get through it. It has reach and hexproof from blue.
Oh, you're saying like if they're mono blue?
Yeah. I mean, even a lot of blue-red decks are going to have problems with this card.
That's true.
It depends what home
this
you
card is not bad against red.
No.
Mono red. No.
Like many cards designed to block other colors. You know, what was the name of that Canopy Spider, the 1/3?
Yeah.
You know, y'all team brought that in instead of Bottle Gnomes against Mono Red, I remember, back in Dave Price's LA.
Oh, yeah. I just tapped Ancient Tomb, played the Spider, burned for 1. That was my Pro Tour.
It was fine, though, right?
No, I got crushed.
Oh. Brian Schneider came in 9th.
Yeah, no, other people did well.
So, yeah, so I think like this is totally a card that I can imagine playing Fair as a prominent sideboard card, and it depends on what the format looks like. If there's a lot of annoying like 1/1 flying creatures, or you know, I think that there's a lot of annoying small creatures that have utility abilities that still require you to kind of get in for combat. This is really good against any kind of decks like that. Also, if there's like Fair token decks, it seems really good against those.
Now, let's picture you have a Spore Web Weaver in play. And let's say that you play your Terror of the Peaks, and you got 1 mana. So you go ahead and you play Selfless Savior. Selfless Savior, yet another Core Set 21 M21 card. It's white for 1/1 dog. Sacrifice Selfless Savior. Another target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. What do you think about this card?
When I first saw this card, it was a humorous tweet that said, "What? This card has no text. It's just a 1/1 for 1."
Because you would never sacrifice.
You would never sacrifice such a cute little dog. It's cool. It's I think there's a long history of 1-drop white creatures that have an ability like this. Actually, probably better than a lot of the ones that have been played in the past.
Yep.
That have very specific, I only help this one person or this one creature, and I have to commit to it early on.
Or cost mana.
Yeah. This seems like, I mean, it's not the kind of card you're just like, oh, wow, this is going to be the pillar of my deck, but it's the kind of card that in a context of many, many other creatures, it would be really good at protecting the one that you care about, and it costs next to nothing, or you pay for it on turn 1 and nobody kills it for a while. It seems awesome.
Yeah, I think that the only way you can really play it fair is if you're getting another synergy out of it. It's possible that it could be enough, but like
other dogs.
Yeah, if you have any dog synergy or something, or if you have some sacrifice, like there's some synergies you could have. It wouldn't take that much because it's a pretty good card. The place where this becomes awesome is if you care. This is so cheap and reliable of a way to do it. So what you do is you play Selfless Savior, which only costs you 1 mana. Terror of the Peaks causes you to be able to do 1 damage. So what you do is you point the 1 damage at your Spore Web Weaver. And then in response, you sacrifice the Selfless Savior, or you can wait for the damage to resolve if you want. It doesn't matter. You sacrifice the Selfless Savior to give the Spore Web Weaver indestructible. It still takes the damage, though, and because it took 1 damage, you'll get a 1/1 Saproling and you'll gain a life. Because you'll have gotten a 1/1 Saproling, you'll then do 1 damage to something, so you choose the Weaver again. And then you'll get another Sapling and a life, and you'll get another token, another life, and you just repeat this as much as you want. And you can stop it at any point because you can just point the 1 damage at your opponent. So you end up with as much life as you want and as many tokens as you want, which is a pretty good position. Now, there's other things you could do to make it so that you actually just win immediately if you want, but that's the simple nuts and bolts version. And there's a lot of ways to give indestructible. Like, Selfless Savior, I think is awesome because it's a creature and it's cheap. So you can use like Adventurous Impulse, stuff like that. But you can also use stuff like Fight as One. Fight as One, obviously you can choose one or both, target human or target non-human. Get +1/+1 and indestructible. So
that's a very underrated card. Just throw it out there.
It is. And so you can just spend 1 mana that way to give your Weaver. Plus that lets you just kind of protect your combo, when you're just setting everything up. You can also use something like Basri Ket. If you have Basri in play already, then you don't even have to spend any mana. You can just make something like, for instance, if you have the dragon already, and Basri Ket, obviously you're already doing pretty good, right? But if you use Basri Ket, you play the spider, and the damage from the spider can be pointed at itself, and it'll be too late then, so maybe that's not the way to do it. Play any other creature. The point is the Basri Ket is another, albeit awkward, way to give indestructible. But part of the reason that it might have extra purpose is that it gives a +1/+1 counter and indestructible in a situation where it's possible that you might actually have some sort of Heliod combo in your deck as well. Because if you have Heliod in play with Sporeweb Weaver, if you have Terror of the Peaks and Sporeweb Weaver, you don't even need indestructible if you have Heliod. Because every time you do damage to the Sporeweb Weaver, like you give the Sporeweb Weaver lifelink, or the drag, basically you can use +1/+1 counters to keep up with the damage,
Yep.
So plus there's already other Heliod combos anyway, like the Merfolk that if you put a counter on it, you get to loot, and then Glinthorn Buccaneer, where every time you discard a card, you do damage to your opponent. And since you did damage to your opponent, you have lifelink, so then you get a counter, so then you get to loot, so then you get to do damage to your opponent. So anyway, I just think there's a lot of combos. And
this seems pretty cool. I think that I like a lot about it is just Terror of the Peaks is so good, and the Spider is so good sometimes that, maybe that there's enough force there that
we also get to set it up. It's a 1-card combo if you have enough time. You have Fiend Artisan.
Oh.
Because Fiend Artisan can get the dog only costs 1, the Weaver costs 3, and the Terror of the Peaks costs 5. And you get to play with cantrip creatures. Like, for instance, Llanowar Visionary is a great creature to sacrifice to your Fiend Artisan.
Oh, man, maybe we should Neoform.
You could Neoform. If you're going to Neoform, though, I think you got to find some 4 that you actually want. Because you got to, or you know what I mean? Like, you got to have something that you can turn into a Terror of the Peaks.
There might just be a value deck that you can put together. Like, isn't there Solemn Simulacrum in this set?
There is. That's not a bad idea. That's that's good. That sounds pretty sweet.
You could literally just make a deck that, like, everything is a 2-for-1. You can Neoform into a toolbox, and that, like, some of it's... obviously the dog is not a 2-for-1. It's just a high utility 1-drop. But, like, you just put it all together, and then, you infinite combo them sometimes. And sometimes you just crush them because, like, every card you played was 2 cards.
Well, the other thing you can do is if you just have a single copy of Heliod in your deck, you can you don't have to you can get out the Heliod and have something that's durable so that they can't necessarily just break up your combo so easily,
Sure.
Plus, like, you can use stuff like Vivian, Champion of the Wilds, or Vivian, Monsters Advocate, or Adventurous Impulse. There's lots of tutors if you want to have more stuff besides just Fiend Artisan and Neoform.
Yeah, I think cards like Impulse are even better in decks where you're getting paid back by the creatures whenever you cast one. So I really like that idea. I think I'm going to sketch something out around it because, it's been a long time since we just had a deck of all Mull Drifters.
Sure. So here's a different angle you can go to. You can play just straight red-green. You can actually cut all of white. The way you get your indestructible then is with Heroic Intervention and Assure Assembly. So Heroic Intervention, 1 green, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible in end of turn. Obviously accomplishes your purpose. It's 1 mana more than some of the other tricks we talked about, but you only have to play 2 colors.
It's also conditionally very useful against people who are going to kill your creatures.
It's a good card.
Yeah.
Assure
I've been defeated by it before in a Grand Prix.
Assure Assembly is a little bit less good of a card, but you can use, like, if you're just straight red green, maybe you could kick the backside off of, like, Paradise Druid or something. But if you're straight red green, you can spend 2 mana at instant speed to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and give it indestructible until end of turn. So that's another way to have +1/+1 counters in the event that you have any +1/+1 counter synergy. But really, you just have a couple tricks that are like passable. It's not like you can't. It's not like Assure is like that bad of a trick, right? Like the card would be amazing at 1, but at 2, it's not that good. But it's passable.
I think Heroic Intervention also is one of those cards which is like, oh man, this stinks. Why are you so dumb that you played a card like this? But then it really can mess up your opponent sometimes, and it's just conditionally you're like, a card for a card, and you especially if you get to keep your dragon or something, it's probably a pretty good deal.
Well, they still lose the 3 life also.
Yeah,
the 3 life is part of the cost. So it could be kind of sweet just, having your mana be real smooth and come out a little bit more consistently. Because you can still use Fiend Artisan to try to set things up and stuff like Adventurous Impulse or any of the Vivians.
The way that I'm imagining it right now, I think I wouldn't mind white just because, A, a lot of the cards that you mentioned, the best ones are white. B, if I've got Solemn Simulacrum to lace my mana together, I'm probably not that worried because a lot of these cards are actually also good blockers.
I think that's a separate deck. I think that once you're going to be all value town, you got to do it the white. The white way sounds better. But if the red-green, I was picturing maybe being hybridized where you're kind of just a red-green monsters deck. But you just have like a few tricks more than average, and you just weirdly have this spider.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I guess like, who is it? Like Gruul Spellbreaker? Is that the 3 casting cost Riot guy? I hate that guy. So, I mean, I could just totally imagine myself playing the spider instead of him and be like, all right, I got this instead of him. I'm not too unhappy.
The other option, you can play black if you want. There's Unlikely Aid. 1 in a black instant. Target creature gets +2/+0 and indestructible until end of turn, which might be better than Assure if you're playing Jund, just on your mana. And then Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose, which lets you win immediately. Because you're gaining infinite life, so you can actually just make your opponent lose infinite life, which maybe that doesn't matter, but maybe just having 1 copy of that is like an interesting part of your toolbox. And if you got Fiend Artisan anyway.
Did you ever write an article about that infinite life, infinite damage deck that we made that didn't actually work?
Yeah, it wasn't even infinite damage though. It was
just their life total.
Yes, yeah.
But if we had this card would work, right?
Yep.
Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose.
Yep. So, maybe this ends up being a player in some powered format, but I'm guessing it's a little slow. The big thing, the one really cool one, is this just too bad to play Chance for Glory as a one-off in your sideboard or something? So Chance for Glory, 1 red, white instant, creatures you control gain indestructible. Take an extra turn after this one. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. So what you do is you play Chance for Glory in your deck because you sideboarded it in against decks with sweepers or whatever, but it also lets you win if you use it as your indestructible piece for your combo because you get to attack immediately and kill them. Is that too fancy? Probably.
I don't know, because people just play that card, right? Like, it's been played, and what card is it that you can't lose the game if it's in play? There's a fair amount of that combination in Standard, I think like a year or so, but it was obviously pre-Oko. But
yeah. So what do you think about Chandra, man? Speaking of 3 red 5 drops.
I had Chandra at the top of the 5.
So talk to me about Chandra. What do you love about Chandra?
So Chandra is a 5 casting cost Chandra, 3 RR for a 5 loyalty. Has 3 abilities. +1, discard your hand, then exile the top 3 cards of your library until end of turn. You may play cards exiled this way. A different +1, Chandra, Heart of Fire deals 2 damage to any target. And then -9, search your graveyard and library for any number of instant or sorcery cards. Exile them, shuffle your library. You may cast them this turn. Add 6 red. I thought that both of the +1 abilities were really strong on this. If you look at like how bad can this card be, is like one of the games I like to play with myself when new cards come out. 5 casting cost, you play it. It's got 5 loyalty, go up to 6 loyalty, ting something for 2. How much did I hate that? I didn't hate that much at all. Just gaining up to 6 loyalty is actually a little bit of protecting itself. You might take out a key creature. The ability to untap with Chandra in play, and then deal 2 damage to any target, perhaps your opponent's face, for purposes of spectacle type stuff, or Chandra's Incinerator, I found to be pretty exciting. But then, obviously, most importantly, if you've got this card and it's like top of the curve, you can either just like empty your hand by, throwing cards at your opponent or throwing cards into the red zone, or, setting yourself up for stuff like Robber the Rich, and then get a lot of value out of that +1 ability. I think both of those +1 abilities I would totally be in for.
Man, I think you're a bigger buyer on it than I am.
I don't think it's the best Planeswalker. I think it's the best of the 5, right? And I think it's... I actually do want to play with this card.
Okay. I mean, it's fine, I guess. Yeah, I guess. Like, 2 damage to any target is, like, not that much better than draw a card, right?
It's a little better than draw a card.
Right, it's not that much, though.
Yeah.
It's pretty close. Like, for instance, you'd probably rather have Scry 1 draw a card. But, like, you'd rather... Maybe Scry 1's probably equal, right? Scry 1 draw a card.
I think that's tough. Scry 2 draw a card I would pick over Deal 2. Scry 1 draw a card, I think they're pretty close. Yeah. Scry 1 draw a card's probably better.
I think so. I think Opt, for instance, is better than Shock.
That's the comparison I had in my head.
And Opt isn't even... I mean... So, but here's the thing. +1, discard your hand, then exile the top 3 cards of your library. Does that ability add that much? It adds some. It's pretty great, right? Like, that is a really awesome angle, because sometimes when a Shock isn't that good, what you really want is Ancestral Recall. So I think if you're going to use this card, you got to be in for the +1 that lets you do that part. The ultimate's nothing special. It's fine. You probably win.
Yeah, it's an ultimate, right? I mean, it's not... Most of the ultimates in the history of the game, if you get there, your opponent's in a dramatically worse position than before you used it.
So I think that where this card ends up being good is the 2 things. In a deck that can take advantage of that top ability because it's got such a low curve, this is at the top. And in a format or a matchup where 2 damage is a particularly meaningful amount.
I
don't think this is just like the thing to top out your red aggro deck. Why would you want this instead of the dragon? Maybe in the sideboard, but like...
Well, I think it's different. So folks have all different things that they're doing at 4s and 5s over the course of the last couple of years, right? Some people are casting Experimental Frenzies. Some people are casting Torbrands. Some people are doing forecasting cost Chandras. And all of them are playing a card that's a little more expensive than the rest of the cards in their deck in order to kind of attack particular opponents in a different way. I think, like, Chandra Heart of Fire is much better if you're going to... assume you're going to resolve your 5, right? Is much better against somebody who can... interact with creatures or interact with creatures at a great amount of value, or can kill your dragon without taking any damage. For example, a deck with like a bunch of Wrath of God type effects, I'd rather have Chandra Heart of Fire than Terror of the Peaks, right? I mean, do those decks have cards like Vanishing Light necessarily? Maybe, right? But they might not be good at interacting with this kind of a permanent. That's the thing. If you assume that it resolves.
I guess I just don't have enough confidence that I know what the context is going to be about all those different matchups. So I just look at the rate.
I think in the dark, Terror of the Peaks is probably the stronger card.
Probably?
Terror of the Peaks is a very good card. It's super exciting. I think of it as like the Siege Rhino of the set. It's not quite Siege Rhino, don't get me wrong, but that's where I have it in my head. Like, Chandra Heart of Fire is one of many Planeswalkers I would consider playing, and there's no shortage of things that are called Chandra that I was excited about that was of, pretty good or, medium playability afterwards. But I think this one's probably going to be... I think it's going to find many homes.
Yeah, I could. I guess. I mean, it depends on. It's more of a. I think it's more of a scalpel, though. But like, you kind of threw me for a loop there. Do you think that the Terror of the Peaks is really as good as Siege Rhino?
No, it's not as good as Siege Rhino.
Okay.
I think it is like the Siege Rhino of this set. That's what I'm saying, right? Like Siege Rhino was, an amazing card on rate. It like had a great body for its casting cost. It essentially drew 2 or 3 cards, right? It's a kind of defining in the format in its way. It incentivized people to play a particular color combination.
It also lined up really well instead of lining up poorly.
I'm sorry, you think Terror of the Peaks lines up poorly with something?
I think that Terror of the Peaks lines up poorly in this format compared to how much raw power it has. I think that like Siege Rhino's power was well spent in that format. Like it was well distributed. And I think that Terror of the Peaks is like phenomenal, but the format is a little hostile to it. So I think that it's not necessarily, I think it's going to be good, but I think it's not necessarily going to be as gangbusters as it would in most formats.
So I don't think that we're disagreeing at all. I mean, Siege Rhino is obviously nutty. I'm just saying, like, on a comparative.
Well, other than on Chandra, I think Chandra we disagree.
I think Chandra is pretty good and not that much worse than Terror of the Peaks. That's my opinion, and I think there will be many cases where I would rather have a Chandra than Terror of the Peaks.
Sure, there will be. I agree. I'll give you that. How about this? Is this fair to say Chandra Heart of Fire is about as good as 5-drop Jace?
Which 5-drop Jace?
There's so many Jace. Just drawing cards and bounce something.
Yeah, no, it's better than that.
Really?
I'm trying to remember which ones I played.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
There were more than one. I mean, some of them you were supposed to know them. Sometimes you were supposed to know yourself.
That one. That one's dope. What about Liliana, man?
I had this one second or third best. I'm not quite sure. I think its card's pretty good. I think it's not as good as.
Where are you using it?
Say again. Sorry.
Where are you going to use it?
Not sure. So let's go over the abilities and then we can get together. So it's a 4 casting cost Liliana for 4 loyalty. This is kind of a theme with these planeswalkers, although Teferi breaks it. So +1, each player discards.
Well, Chandra breaks it too.
No, it's 5 casting costs for 5 loyalty.
Oh! You're saying that they match?
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, I mean, because it's Teferi. I got you. Okay.
So, Teferi kind of only breaks it, right? But we can get there in a second. Each player discards a card. Each opponent who can't loses 3 life. -3, target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. And then -7, you get an emblem with at the beginning of combat on your turn. Put target creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. So I thought of this card as kind of like in one of those rat decks. Like it is the discard mechanism and the rack at the same time on the +1. That's kind of where I was thinking about it.
It's not at the same time. It's one or the other.
Well, it has kind of both those functions going though, and it's potentially a mechanism to card advantage. And I didn't really care about either of the other 2 abilities that much. When
you have to care about the -3, right? There's no way this card is good unless you care about the
No. I agree with you, right? The other 2 abilities contribute to the overall playability of the card. I'm just excited about the +1 is what I'm saying versus the other 2. Like the -3 is potentially quite unreliable.
Yeah, it's also inefficient from a loyalty expenditure standpoint. We always talk about how, like, for instance, Jace's 0 ability, the Brainstorm one, the OGG, Jace the Mind Sculptor's 0 ability is the best. That's the bread and butter. But the -1 ability, even though Unsummon is a weaker card than Brainstorm, and it costs a loyalty, it's tactically amazing, right? Like very, very good. But Liliana, her removal spell's tactically good. However, instead of a delta of 1 loyalty, it's a delta of 4. So it's like extremely expensive to use this tactical option.
and sometimes just has no text.
So, yeah, I don't know, man. You do have to build around the top ability, but I really think that you're probably not going to get there unless you care about the middle ability also.
What do you think about that -7 ability?
I don't know, man. It's another ultimate. Whatever. It's fine. It's like not even as good of an ultimate as a lot of them. Are you super into it?
I think it's one of those things that if you've got the +1 going to the point that you get to that -7, you're probably going to win, right? Like you are ripping up your opponent's hand. Presumably you're doing... I mean, cards like this that are like semi-symmetrical, right? Like both things are happening to both players. I'm sorry. That effect is happening to both players at the same time. You kind of have to do something to be getting ahead or you're going to be behind, right? Like, because it's happening to both players. So
you could have your hand empty or jumpstart or void, like graveyard creatures.
Yeah, you either need to, spend your hand aggressively to kill their stuff so that you're not discarding cards at the same rate that they are, or you're deliberately discarding creatures that you're eventually going to want to reanimate with the -7, or some combination of those things. Or you're just doing something like, all right, I spend my card to unsummon your creature, so I'm getting a card out of my hand, but then I'm making you discard your creature, right? Like something like that, which is not card advantage, but contextually it could be really effective because among other things, you're putting a card into your graveyard. So you have to build your deck in order to be able to exploit that +1. Because if you're just like, all right, both of us are just going to discard every turn, at some point they're just going to be way ahead of you, right? So, but I think it's not difficult to imagine a deck where you've got Liliana in it. Much of the rest of your deck is some kind of removal or discard or both, right? Maybe you're like discard against control, removal against creatures, and then you're just discarding the thing that isn't good, right? So you're discarding your creature removal against control, or you're like double discarding against beatdown until you get to nothing, and then now you have no cards in hand, so they're discarding at a greater rate than you, and you're top decking and playing whatever lands you have. You're happy with this for some reason, That, I think, is a deck that is easily imaginable and could probably be built in a way to defend Liliana's loyalty. But this isn't one of the kind of cards you just throw into a deck and it will be very effective.
Yeah. I'm not sure I even like this one that much. I don't know.
I like it way more than a bunch of Lilianas that require you to have a bunch of zombies in your deck. Like how many Lilianas are there that people are like, oh man, this card's so good, and then it just doesn't do that much because the zombie context isn't good enough for it, right? Or it sees very spotty play. That I think this is a better Liliana than many of those Lilianas.
Well, fortunately, that's not the bar. I would not be surprised if this ended up being the least played.
Wow, we've had many candidates for least played.
What about Teferi, Master of Time, dude?
Among other things, this is the most interesting of all, bar none. So
you may activate loyalty abilities of Teferi, Master of Time on any player's turn. Anytime you could cast an instant.
Yep.
That's cool. So, +1, draw a card, then discard a card. -3, target creature you control phases out, which means treat it and anything attached to it as though they don't exist.
You don't control.
You don't control, phases out. Treat it and anything attached to it as though they don't exist until the next turn, which means now that they've cleaned up the phasing rules and everything, nothing leaves play, nothing enters play. It just doesn't exist for a little while. And then -10, take 2 extra turns after this one. For a 3 base loyalty that I think you alluded to earlier is a little bit of an illusion because you could use him twice. You're effectively, it's like a Planeswalker that started at 4,
Yeah.
Because you can just tick him up, and then on your opponent's turn, you could use the -3 to phase something out.
So the situations will be very unusual that you cast Teferi, Master of Time, you don't immediately use the +1, right? So for other Planeswalkers, you might use the -3 and just spend it, right? But that's not the case here. You'll usually use the +1 unless there's something really weird.
The only weird thing, the most reliable one by far, is that you remove the last blocker so that you can kill them or kill their Planeswalker.
Sure.
That's going to be the most tactical thing. It's just it's such an inefficient way to use the card that it's not going to come up that much.
But the thing is, the floor on this card. I mean, how different would this card be if the +1 is just draw a card instead of draw a card, discard a card? It would be wildly different card. So,
Yeah, but dude, what does that mean? I think Careful Study would be a wildly different card if it was just draw 2 cards instead of draw 2, discard 2, or Faithless Looting.
Yeah, they'd kind of be worse. So, Teferi, Master of Time, you could just play it, and you imagine a 4 casting cost card that, if it's not immediately in danger, is just like 2 loots for 4 mana. I guess that's just a Careful Study, right? It's a Careful Study.
I think, but it's actually better in some regards, because sometimes when you're careful studying and having to commit all on your own turn, you don't have all the information.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of nice to be able to careful study 1 card on your turn, set some stuff up, and careful study in response to something your opponent does, so that you can decide whether you pitch the removal spell or the negate or the essence scatter or whatever you're doing.
Sure. Or certainly if you've got, obviously this isn't going to come up in Standard right now, but if you've got some kind of circular logics or something like that, the ability to have broken up a careful study would have been very welcome back in the day. To be awesome here, right? So, getting that careful study, but then you now have 5 loyalty on the untap if that's how you're using this card. And then another thing about it is 1 loot and then 1 phasing, and then you get to keep Teferi, Master of Time. That's not too bad.
Yeah, having that as an insurance policy in case your opponent drops some kind of a haste creature, that's pretty dope.
Yeah, I love that.
I also think that you can really get going with this ultimate. I actually think Teferi, Master of Time's ultimate is a higher percentage of the card's play than we usually see on Planeswalkers. And that's because of him ticking up +2 a turn and you not being as exposed. I think a lot of Planeswalkers, sometimes you have to be conservative because of the risk of what could go wrong. But the fact that Teferi gets half his play on your opponent's turn at instant speed means that you don't have to protect it as much, because he can protect himself if stuff goes south.
Yeah, he can protect himself against haste creatures. He can protect himself against creature lands, all kinds of stuff that isn't usually vulnerable to sorcery speed point removal.
And when you're ticking him up 2 a turn, it doesn't take very many turns to take 2 extra turns, because he goes from 3 to 5, then 5 to 7, 7 to 9, 9 to 11, and then you can take 2 extra turns and keep him. But during those 2 extra turns, he ticks up 2 more. So you can actually get into a spot where you're taking 33% more turns than your opponent. And I think that's just going to be a thing that actually happens a surprising amount of the time.
Right. So if you take two more turns, right? So assume he's got loyalty.
Because you're only getting 1 each time, because you don't get the +1 from the opponent's turn that you normally would.
Oh, okay.
But the other combo, well, first of all, one more tactical application. You can use the phase out ability on your own turn as well. Let's say that you've just gone +1/+1 and then it's your turn. You could be in a spot where you could attack. If your opponent uses a kill spell, a pump spell, in order to kill your attacker, there's various things that might happen that cause it so that you could actually use the phase out ability on your own turn to negate certain types of tricks your opponents might have.
Yeah, that's really cool.
The other mono combo with this card is, of course, Teferi's Ageless Insight, which is an enchantment, a legendary enchantment. 2 blue. If you would draw a card, except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 instead.
Yes, that is a super mondo combo, right? So even though you're supposed to be looting, you're just going to be way ahead when you've got this. So if you've got Teferi's Ageless Insight, then all the Teferi
options to draw 2
are going to be awesome. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Every cantrip is a draw 2 or better. But if you use Teferi, each of time you'll catalog, you'll be draw 2, discard 1, draw 2, discard 1. You do not need to do that very much before you have completely taken over. But you might not even need Teferi, because lots of stuff is really good with this. If you're using any just random cantrips, if you just play Teferi's Ageless Insight in some sort of an Izzet deck with a bunch of cantrips, you're going to completely take over the game so fast, right?
Of course. I was actually thinking about it from the other angle, which is that if you get a turn cycle and you get to untap with Teferi Master of Time, right? Especially if you did 2+1s to get there, you're going to be in a situation, I think, where if you've built your deck in a way that makes sense, you're just going to be crafting whatever you need in order to defend Teferi Master of Time, and you're just going to get to the position that you can -10 or get to Teferi's Ageless Insight or whatever regalia you want to put together. Like, the card is, like, very well designed for making a perfect hand to defend yourself.
Yeah, I just think that you're talking about Teferi still, though, right?
Yeah.
Teferi's Ageless Insight, the more exciting card? I mean, Teferi's, like, cooler, but Teferi's Ageless Insight is, like, busted. If you Cathartic Reunion, you draw 6. Like,
all right.
Isn't this card messed up? How is this card, like, not completely amazing?
Well, maybe it is amazing.
Like, I don't know. Like, what? I guess it just doesn't even make sense to me why this card would not be incredible.
I don't know. Maybe it is incredible.
Just like you could just jumpstart.
Oh,
yeah, I think
is sweet.
Yeah, dude, draw some cards, but draw twice as many all of the time for no reason.
Well, there's a reason. You committed 4 mana and a bunch of slots in your deck. But once you pay that cost, yeah, probably take it.
And who knows? I mean, what if you could just got ways to, like, if you've just got some. First of all, Teferi's Ageless Insight, great with Yawgmoth's Bargain.
Hey, you know what's great with Yawgmoth's Bargain? Magic cards.
Okay, here's another one for you. Teferi's Ageless Insight with, there's got to be some ways to just keep looting, right? Like to just pay to loot. Because I guess maybe Teferi is accomplishing the same thing.
Okay, how about Teferi's Ageless Insight with cycling cards? Right?
Totally.
It's like infinity cycling cards. Most of them cycle for 1 these days.
Yep, sorry. There is one last blue card I'd love to touch on before the end of the day, though, if we could.
Absolutely.
Baron, Tolarian Archmage.
Oh, Baron. This guy. So Baron, Tolarian Archmage, 1 UU for a 2/2, legendary creature, human wizard. When Baron, Tolarian Archmage enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw a card. Minimum Mana War.
Well, Mana War that costs an extra blue and is a legend.
Yeah.
Now, in exchange for those 2 concessions, 1, it's a legend, which could be upside. 2, it's an optional ability. 3, wizard and human are good types. 4, it can bounce a planeswalker, whether your opponent's to give you tempo or your own to reset its loyalty. 5, you can draw cards. Like, first of all, you could just bounce itself so that every turn you're spending 3 mana to draw a card. No, not itself.
No,
but like,
you can't target itself. But, like, think about...
Well, I guess the legend rule, you can't do it that way. So, yeah, that doesn't get you there.
Think about this. What is better, +0, +1, or the second clause on Baron? The option of drawing extra cards.
The option drawing extra cards is better than a point of toughness.
Yeah, so Reflector Mage wasn't much more than +0, +1 relative to I mean, I guess like the semi-meddling mage ability was pretty relevant there, but Reflector Mage was far and away the best card in certain formats that it was eventually banned in. Right? So
and yeah, I mean, I think that bounce your opponent's thing, they can't play it next turn. It's at least comparable to bounce your opponent's thing or their planeswalker or your own thing. Like all those different options add up to something that, and you know, Reflector Mage's ability is, Reflector Mage is slightly easier to cast for some decks, but Baron is a lot easier to cast for some decks.
Yeah.
I do love the choice to make it a legend, though, so that you're not just getting hit with this nonstop.
Yeah, this card is gonna be really good. I mean, I think its most obvious application is just Mana War for tempo. I'm not even sure how you set up the second clause. Like, I mean, I guess sometimes you just bounce your own thing. I guess if you're bouncing value creatures, it's
Right.
probably insane, right? Like you Baron bouncing Solemn Simulacrum or something.
And that's to say nothing of, one of those various clones that you can copy a legend with a different name or whatever.
Oh yeah. Is there anything that gives creatures flash in standard right now?
Wow, you just want to build a Venser? Dude,
Yeah,
they got unsubstantiate.
well, I was just kind of thinking like, get a good block in, Baron during combat, that kind of thing does not take very long before your opponent doesn't want to keep playing that particular duel.
Dude, is there anything better than just this new shipwreck? No, it's not the shipwreck. Which one's the guy that gives -1? The Waker of Waves.
Dude, that card is sweet.
It's so sweet. 5 blue, 7/7. Creatures your opponent control have -1, -0. And then it has 1 in a blue, discard Waker of Waves to look at the top 2 cards to your library, put 1 in your hand and the other into your graveyard.
That card is great, but it's confusing, right? So I presume that second ability is when it's in your hand, correct?
Yeah, it's just cycling, but they didn't want to put it here because there are no other cards in the set that say cycling.
Yeah, I just think that I think like
its cost doesn't get reduced by things that reduce cost by cycling.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it said something like use this ability only if Waker of Waves is in your hand or something, would have been.
No, dude, that's discard. That's the only place you can discard from.
Anyway, that second ability makes this card insane, right? Like it's
playable, but yeah.
By insane, I mean playable. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good. So look, you can't counter it. I mean, you can, right? You can't counter it with regular countering things, and it's a little bit better than cycling, right?
It's a little bit worse than cycling too. But yeah, you need the fact that you're not just drawing a card; you're drawing one of your top 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot better than cycling.
And then once it's in play, it could be pretty meaningful. Like, I mean, this is actually just.
And you're discarding; you're not even putting on the bottom. So you'll have this 7/7, and whatever you discard, you can be setting up some reanimation shenanigans pretty effectively.
Yep. Also, just don't discount just giving multiple creatures -1, -0. Like, just as an example, token-based decks, they might have 100 bodies that no longer deal any damage anymore, right? Like, having 2 of these things is, like, utterly dominating, I bet, sometimes. I think this card is really cool because control deck, I don't know if there's mono blue decks or blue-white decks, whatever, you just plausibly play 4 and not worry about it, right? That in a situation like, they wouldn't normally play, like, 4 super expensive big creatures or whatever. Just play 4 of these. It's an Omen of the Sea sometimes and a finishing creature sometimes.
God, sorry to hit you with one more, but dude, you were saying you weren't sure how to enable Baron. What about Nyambi, Esteemed Speaker? White blue for a 2/2 Legend Human Cleric. Sorry, 2/1 Legend Human Cleric. It's a 2/1 flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, gain life equal to that creature's converted mana cost. That's a dope ability. And then 1 a white, a blue, tap, discard a legendary card to draw 2 cards.
Oh my gosh, this card is like... First of all, it's like 2/1 flash for 2 that has other text just on that come into play. It's gonna have value from that, but I love cards like this where you can plausibly imagine situations where your opponent's just never getting out from under it. Like,
it loops with Baron. Now it's once a turn cycle or however much you can spend mana on, but what you do is you can Baron your Nyambi, and that'll have counted as a creature going to your hand, and so then you'll draw a card, and then on your opponent's turn, you can Nyambi, bounce your Baron, potentially after blocking, right? Gain 3 life, and then on your turn, bounce Nyambi, draw a card. So you can actually be neutralizing a creature every turn while also gaining 3 life and drawing an extra card. And that's just with your super duper value, cheap, effective flash, your tempo cards.
Yeah, I think this card's awesome. I mean, that other ability, 1 white, blue, discard a legendary card, draw 2 cards, it's not unbeatable. That's too strong of a word. It's really bad for people if you've built a deck to exploit that.
Maybe.
As an engine?
The fact that you're not paying for it is what makes it really good. Because I think that the card straight up is like respectable. Turning your extra copies of Legends into divinations that also require you losing the use of this creature, that's not like that insane or anything. It's useful, but you're still buying an overpriced divination.
Yeah, but the way that I look at it, imagine you're like playing a blue-white mirror, and then they're like, you go, it's their turn, it's the end of their first turn. You just like flash Nyambi into the battlefield. You get there if you want to. Then you just like sit back. You never, assuming
but all you did was think twice.
Well, no, I think like you're presenting difficult thought processes into your opponent sometimes. No,
only for some.
I don't know, Patrick. I think like the prospects of the opponent having an uncounterable divination, not every turn because you need to have sufficient fuel for this.
It's also a 2/1. It's not like it's durable.
It's durable in a blue-white control matchup. No one can kill it.
Turning on the removal.
But I'm presuming this is in games where I guess there's all kinds of stuff.
How are you using the top ability then? Dude, yeah, I think you got to play this in a creature deck.
All right.
With a bunch of value creatures.
That's a way to play it. I think this card will see some riotous times. I don't think that we're in disagreement on that one.
No, I totally agree. Card's dope. Awesome, dude. Favorite card of the week? Mine's Baron. What about you?
Baron is awesome. I think I'll go with Baron. I love Mana War so much, and this Baron is just so good relative to Mana War.
Same. Awesome, dude. I'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge into jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive to gain the love. It kept me alive.